Homeland Security says hackers are actively exploiting a vulnerable security update. They can easily get into servers,
personal information of millions of Microsoft SharePoint users,
and government agencies around the world.
2 simple tricks. That's all it took to hack 200,000 organizations and cost billions in damages. And your company was probably one of them. Microsoft SharePoint, the app that 85% of Fortune 500 companies use to store their files, share documents, and run their daily operations. Think of it as the digital filing cabinet where your company keeps everything important: contracts, financial records, employee data, trade secrets. If your company shares files digitally, you're probably using SharePoint. Which is exactly why, when Chinese state-sponsored hackers discovered 2 simple ways to break in, the results were catastrophic. Ever wonder why websites ask you to log in? It's because someone programmed them to check if you're supposed to be there before letting you access anything important. You enter your username and your password, and the server gives you a cookie. Basically, a digital pass that says you're allowed to be here. Simple, secure, and it works. But SharePoint also had a faster way to verify users, something called header-based authentication. Instead of checking for cookies, the server would look at where you came from. If the system detected you just visited the sign out page, it assumed you were a legitimate user who had just logged out and wanted back in. Because, obviously, if you're coming from inside, you must belong there. But this seemingly innocent feature was about to become a billion-dollar mistake, and the Chinese state-sponsored hacking groups were the first to spot it. Hacking groups Linen Typhoon and Violet Typhoon decided to test it on one of the most sensitive targets they could find, the US National Nuclear Security Administration. The hackers crafted a single HTTP request targeting /toolpane.aspx, SharePoint's administrative interface. They manipulated something called the referrer header, essentially telling SharePoint that they had just come from the sign-out page. SharePoint looked at this forged request and thought, oh, if they're coming from the sign-out page, they must have been a legitimate user who had just signed out. Nothing suspicious here. And just like that, it granted administrative access to America's nuclear secrets. But having the keys to the front door wasn't enough. The hackers wanted the master key to the entire building, and SharePoint's helpful nature was about to give it to them. SharePoint, like most modern software, has a feature called deserialization. It takes incoming data packages and then unpacks them, trusting that legitimate administrators wouldn't send anything malicious. The hackers uploaded a script disguised as normal administrative data, naming it spinstall0.aspx. When SharePoint processed this seemingly innocent script, it handed over something called the machine key, essentially the cryptographic master password for the entire server. With that key, the hackers can now impersonate any user, access any file, and control any function of the system. They'd gone from complete outsiders to having total control of one of America's most sensitive computer systems. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, while Linen Typhoon and Violet Typhoon were exploring the NNSA's nuclear secrets, other Chinese hacking groups were watching and learning. Storm 2603, another state-sponsored group, saw the same vulnerabilities but had a different business model in mind: ransomware. Within days, they began systematically attacking corporate SharePoint servers using the exact same 2 tricks. But instead of stealing secrets, they deployed something called Warlock ransomware, encrypting everything and demanding payment. The attacks spread like wildfire because SharePoint connects to everything else in a company's digital ecosystem. Compromise SharePoint, and you potentially control an organization's entire infrastructure. Fortune 500 companies went dark, university systems crashed, hospitals lost access to patient records. Microsoft's response was admirably fast. They released patches for the vulnerabilities within days. And the frustrating part, many organizations hadn't installed them yet. Some servers were running software months at a date. Others delayed updates for testing. Some IT departments didn't even know patches were available. The hackers were counting on exactly this delay, the gap between a vulnerability being discovered and actually being fixed. Each day that passed meant more victims. Each successful breach cost an average of $4.45 million. And we're talking about thousands of affected organizations, maybe even yours. The financial damage reached into the billions, but the real cost was something harder to measure: trust. If the software you trusted to protect your organization's most sensitive data can be compromised this easily, what else is vulnerable? The hackers didn't use quantum computers or advanced AI. They used publicly available tools that IT professionals use every day. Tools like Mimikatz, which has been extracting passwords from computer memory for over a decade, and ps_exec, standard software for moving between network computers. The sophistication wasn't in the technology. It was in understanding how to make these everyday actions look completely normal to security systems, exploiting something fundamental about how computers make decisions. When you present the right credentials and speak the right digital language, computers are designed to be your best friend. And if you can fake those credentials convincingly enough, these systems will be just as helpful to attackers as they are to everyday users. Microsoft's solution was encouraging organizations to migrate to SharePoint Online, their cloud version, which wasn't affected by these vulnerabilities. But this creates its own trust equation. Instead of trusting your own IT team to maintain security, you're trusting Microsoft to protect your data. For many organizations, the trade-off makes sense. Microsoft has resources most companies can't match. But it also means centralizing risk. When cloud systems get compromised, the impact can be even more widespread. But what if the most effective defense against this billion-dollar attack was something every IT department already had? Microsoft released patches for the SharePoint vulnerabilities within days of discovering the active exploitation. The fix was sitting in update queues around the world. Companies that installed them immediately were protected, but thousands of others hesitated. Some wanted to test the updates first, others were waiting for maintenance windows, and some IT departments were simply overwhelmed with the scale of the crisis. While they calculated, the hackers kept working. Each day of delay meant more breached servers, more stolen data, more ransomware infections. The organizations that acted quickly dodged a bullet. The ones that hesitated, they became case studies in why sometimes being cautious is the most dangerous choice you can make. And that's perhaps the most frustrating part. In an age of sophisticated cyber threats, one of the biggest security disasters was ultimately solved by something as simple as clicking install updates. The SharePoint hack wasn't really about advanced nation-state capabilities or cutting-edge attack techniques. It was about trust, how computers decide who to trust, and how hackers exploit that trust, and how two simple tricks brought down thousands of organizations. Because cybersecurity isn't about building impenetrable walls. It's about teaching computers to have better judgment about who they let in. And based on this story, we clearly still have work to do.